are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Policy and Practice webinar. This morning, the webinar is how to make the welfare system simple to understand, and it's great to have you all here today. Without further ado, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping just while we're waiting for a few more people, late joiners to come on board. And while they're coming, if I could just ask you to have a look at the panel on the right hand side, and if you could give me an audio check by waving your digital hand, so that I can see that you can hear me. Okay. If you just click the icon to raise your hand. And while you're doing that, if I could just urge you to please do ask questions throughout the webinar in the same panel. Thank you very much. I shall put your hands down now. But do ask questions in the same panel on the right-hand side throughout the survey, throughout the webinar, and there'll be a chance at the end for me to pick up the questions to our speakers. There will be 3 polls, so nice and interactive today, and there will be a very short feedback survey at the end, which would be really grateful if you could let us know how you think we've done. And we will have you on your way by 11:30. And we have a lot to get through. So what I'd like to do is to introduce you to our speakers. So we are going to have Zoe Charlesworth from Policy and Practice and Leonardo Kellaway from Policy and Practice, and they'll be speaking with you today. In the way of webinars, it's always nice to see their faces, and this is what they look like. So just a very, very quick introduction for anybody who doesn't know Policy and Practice. Our mission is to make the welfare system simple to understand, so that people can make the decisions that are right for them. There's a lot more about us, and I'm aware that some of you do know us already. So if you would like to know a little bit more about our ethos and our mission, please take a look at our website. In the About section, you'll find out all about us there, and indeed members of the wider team. So today we've got a lot to cover. We're going to talk through how to make the welfare system simple to understand. We're going to start off with a survey shortly, and we're going to talk about the complexity of the welfare system, because it is a bit of a mammoth task to say making the welfare system simple to understand. So we just want to have a little talk about the complexity of the system, and indeed the importance of the role of the frontline advisor in helping people, and also then how software can simplify the income maximisation advice that you will be giving to your clients. Zoe and Leah, between them, are going to give 3 very short demonstrations using the software to show you how you can help clients to help themselves in terms of the information that they need, how you can use software to explain the benefit assessments that people receive, and also how you can use software to simplify the budgeting advice that you can give to people. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more that the software can do, but this is what we're focusing on today. And then we're going to just cover some next steps at the end of the session. Great, so I hope you're all settled in. Thank you very much again for joining us. And I'm going to kick off with our first poll, if I may. So just bear with me while I set that up. So the poll that we are going to talk about today, this session, how many welfare reforms do you think were introduced between April last year and April this year? So I'm going to serve this poll now. I'm very interested to see what you think. So the questions are, how many welfare reforms were introduced between April 2016 and April 2017? The answers that you can choose from, please choose one, were there 32 reforms introduced, 21, 5, or 13? How many do you think were introduced? I'm just going to give you a little bit longer to vote. Thank you very much. I see all the votes coming in there. Hugely complex welfare reforms, and indeed between April 2016, of course, we know that there were many more reforms introduced before that, and indeed there are more planned to come. But just between this one period in time. Thank you. I can see that most people have voted now. So what I am going to do is close the poll and then share the results with you. So hopefully you can see there on the screen, the 10% of you say that there were 32 reforms introduced, in last year. 40% say 21 were introduced, 20% say 5 were introduced, and 30% say 13 were introduced. A very quite a broad, quite a mixed bag of results there. And what I will do now is very interesting results. Now I'm sure I can bring Zoe in at this point, and I am sure that Zoe will have some comments on that.
Yeah, I think for all of us who are working with customers, it seems more than any of these numbers in the poll completely. It's interesting, isn't it? Because what is a welfare benefit reform? Is it the act that creates a reform? So some people are choosing just a few. They know that there's about hundreds of statutory instruments that follow on from that act. And other people were looking at the actual changes to existing legislation and the introduction of new, whether through bills, acts, or under statutory instruments. So it could have been any of those, really, couldn't it? But we've got a roadmap here that just shows how complex things have become. And everyone working with customers really needs to be up to date with this all the time. But as soon as you're up to date, something else comes in. And we've just had all the changes around 2 children in April. We've got childcare cost changes coming in September, other changes in 18, 19, 20. And of course, we've now got a new government, and they're going to be working with DUP, who have a different attitude towards welfare reform. So whether that impacts on the welfare reform rollout in the UK as a whole, or if it just applies to Ireland, we'll have to wait and see. But it does look like things aren't going to get easier anytime soon. And this just goes to underline what a complex system it is. Loads of different benefit types, each of those with different legislation, acts, statutory instruments, uprating, and then we've got on top of that all the guidance. And trying to get trying to work your way through that maze is hard for us who know what we're doing, and absolutely impossible for your customers. It's all complicated a bit further with people having to know legacy benefits and universal credit. In this transition period, actually, there's more to know than you've ever had to know before. And of course, we've got different organisations who are administering these benefits. So my view is that nobody can understand it all. I mean, even people who've worked in benefits for 30 years, like myself, you'll know some benefits inside out. You can pick up a pen and paper and assess them. Other ones, you'll have to go right back to the regulations and the guidance and start from scratch. So support is required, and it's required, I think now, more than ever. For a lot of your customers, there's this concern about moving between legacy benefits and universal credit. And that's a real concern for some of them. They will have read in the papers about how people will lose income under universal credit. They will know about the 7-week wait, because that's always in the newspapers. And so there'll have to be a lot of worry there. And this comes at a time when communication with DWP is tricky. It's tricky for landlords, it's tricky for housing associations, tricky for councils, very tricky for the customers. There's a lot of new staff being taken on at the DWP advice centres, and I'm sure things will improve. I mean, I have confidence that things will improve. But at the moment, the level of advice is distant, and it's restricted. So things will need to improve on that area. We've also got the housing benefits. As housing benefits disappears and the housing element comes within universal credit, those housing benefit advisors have been giving advice to customers for years. They know benefits. They don't just know housing benefits. They point people in the right direction. All those people who go into the housing benefits, the advisors usually will check their other benefits as well. And as that role disappears, we're left with a sort of gap about where people can go for information. In the end, people will turn to their local authorities when things get really bad. If they're not a housing association tenant, in which case they'll probably turn to the housing association. But otherwise, they will turn to the local authorities, and there have to be staff who are able to give this sort of advice and support people. And we've got the cut back in support to third-party organisations. A lot of, especially debt work, was done by charities within regions, and a lot of that funding has been cut back. And on top of this, we've got the localisation of council tax support, which it means it's very hard for people to work out how much council tax support they'll get, as these schemes can be changing every year. So we'll move on. We use software to help us understand the benefit system, and all of our customers who are using this software find that it helps them explain the benefit system to people, but also help people take steps forward. These are just some of our customers. As you can see, these are people who are using the software. There's many more, but we've just put these ones here to show you that we've got further educational colleges, we've got homelessness charity, housing associations, local authorities, back to work providers. So there's a range of people, but what these people all have in common is that they're all customer focused. They're all trying to do the best for the customer. We'll move on, Janet.
Great. So
yes, Janet, thank you for the poll.
yeah, brilliant. Okay, I told you there were 3 polls. This is the second one, so keeping it interactive. What we would like to know at this point, what are the most important uses of a calculator for your organisation? So if I could just serve that poll now. And you should see this on your screen shortly. So yeah, so the question here is, what are the most important uses of a calculator for your organisation? And there's 5 options here for you to choose. So is it simplifying benefits advice? Is it simplifying budgeting advice? Is it helping people into work? Is it providing a self-serve facility, or is it something else? So I'd like you to vote now if you can. If it is something else, we'd be really interested to know what it is. We're not presuming too much that we know all the answers here. So if you're using a calculator for something else, please let us know in the panel on the right hand side what that would be, because it's very interesting to us. Thank you very much, everybody. I can see the voting is carrying on as we speak. I'll just give you a couple more seconds to get your votes in, and that's to a minute, so I'll finish there now. Thank you, everybody, for your votes, and I will close that and share that with you. So hopefully there you can see on your screen 67% of you say that the most important use of a calculator for your organisation is simplifying benefits advice, and also 67% of you say it's simplifying budgeting advice that you can give as well. So the two together there. 33% again, jointly, we're helping people into work and also providing a self-serve facility. Very interesting. Thank you very much. So any comments on those results before I hide the poll?
Yeah, I'm pleased to see that so many people are using the self-service facility, and it's something we'll come on to later in this, is that there's a huge amount of people who can actually help themselves, and all they want to know is the level of benefits they will get if they, in certain circumstances. And actually that, if those people can be encouraged to help themselves through a self-service facility that's simple to use, that means that your expert advisors, and all the organisations that will be on this call will have expert advisors, and your customer centre, your expert advisors, these people can focus where it's really needed, because there will always be cases where advisors are needed to check benefits, to discuss next steps with people, and there'll always be people who aren't happy using digital. So I am pleased that some people see the importance of a self-service facility here, but I do agree that simplifying benefits advice, simplifying budgeting advice makes the work of advisors much quicker. They can do that. They can then help people much quicker, and they can then help more people. So yeah, it's more or less as we would have expected, I think.
Great stuff. Okay, Zoe.
Yeah, I just want to go through a few bits about our calculator. I'm not going to spend long on this because you'll see an awful lot during the demonstration. And there are lots of calculators available, and they all have different strengths. But what we're trying to do with ours is these 3 key concepts. So we're trying to maximise income, obviously by an accurate benefits assessment, and also showing people how they would be better off in work. So very simple, easy to use tools to see how employment would affect people. It's engaging, it's easy to use. So our self-service one takes people step by step through, and there's help advice as they go through. And what we've introduced on this version of the calculator is this action-orientated advice. We try to ensure that somebody who's looking for help can walk away with a piece of paper that will tell them, talk about next steps, about action they can take. And what's really important here is getting that action personalized. People will engage much more if the actions and the impacts of benefits are personalised rather than just providing a fact sheet about LHAs or benefit cap. If people can actually see how these affect them and how they can change their situation, but all the figures are based on their circumstances, it does make a huge difference to how your customers will engage. And obviously this has this will have benefits for the organisation, for housing associations and councils who still have their own council stock. This is obvious that if you've maximised income, you've got less rent arrears. But it's also, yeah, move on to the next slide, please, Janet. This is a slide I love. Some of you will have seen it before, and it was from a seminar provided by Curo Housing Association. And I think it just rings a bell with everybody who's ever worked with customers, is that 30% of tenants require no support. And these are the people who could probably use this. They'll use your self-service calculator. They'll turn up at, they'll turn up at your organisation if they need support. But if there's a self-service calculator there, they'll use it. They'll get the information they require. Some require some support. They'll need the interpretation of the results, a little bit of advice from customer services officers. But for 20%, there'll always be an awful lot of work. These are people where you've spotted that their benefit isn't correct. You're having to take things forward with the DWP. You're having to advocate on people's behalf. And as we all know, those complex cases are the ones that take up 80% of the time. We're going to try in these demonstrations to show you how the calculator can work for all these client groups. So we're going to look at some cases. And the first case we're going to look at is through our self-service portal. Now, the self-service portal is anybody who uses our calculator will know you can have an expert version for yourselves and your advisors, but there's a very simplified version that you can put on your website, or you can have it in your customer centre. So I'm going to pass over to Leo, so he's going to just do a quick run through the self-service calculator.
Okay, thank you for that, Zoe. Hopefully you can all see my screen. My name is Leonardo. I'm going to run through the self-service additional feature of our calculator. And those of you that have already seen this calculator will notice that this one is slightly different. It's a slightly simplified version for customers to use. And how can this be accessed? This can be accessed in a number of ways, either through the organization's website or through a customer service center, or even through targeted support, where some of your advisors notify your customers to complete this calculation that they can then send back and can be gone through with the advisor. Now, one of the features of this is that it's very simple to use. We guide the user through the calculator at every stage. So you'll notice these tooltips that give that extra bit of information that needs on how to use the calculator. And we also only show the required number of questions. So, for example, the more complicated the case, the more questions the user needs to answer. And the final feature that I'd like to just highlight before we do the demonstration is the interactive sidebar on the side, which updates on the fly and allows the user to know what's happening with their benefits as they change their circumstances, and also allows them to go straight to the benefit that they're entitled to. So the scenario here is that the user's been recently made redundant. He's using the Housing Association's website to see what support they can get, and if he's entitled to any support for his housing. So it's a simple case with 2 young children, and we're just going to put in some property details. So social rents. And it's going to be a 2-bedroom property, and you'll see how easy it is to fill in. The questions have been organised in a way that is just like filling out a form. And rent in here, And automatically you can see on the right that there is going to be some support available for housing benefit and so forth. Now, this person is no longer in work, but they are going to be receiving contributory benefits because the user was working and contributing before. There's no other savings, but in the tax credit section, we are going to enter the previous year's earnings of 16,000 a year. So we're going to see our results from report. So we're going to see straight away that we can see under both systems. So if the user was moving over to universal credit, we can see the impact that that would have. We can see that they would get some support for housing benefit, the full amount. And we could also see what would happen if there was that switch. So if we were to compare both systems, we can actually see that if this user was in a full service area, they would be slightly worse off by £44. And if the user been needing extra support was looking to do additional short-term work, we can actually see what impact that would have on their take-home income. So if we were to set the wage at £10 an hour, what would happen if they were to earn £14 an hour, work 14 hours a week, or move up to £25 a week? So you can see how this starts to be useful to the user as self-serving themselves and supporting themselves through that process. Now, back to you, Zoe.
Hi, Leah. I'll just wait for your screen to disappear and the next slide to come up. I think, yeah, thanks. I think that what's really useful there and very interesting to us is that when we show people who don't know benefits the calculator and let them go through that self-service, they find it all very easy to use. We had a lot of initial feedback. It's very easy to use. It's very intuitive. The slider at the end, people tend to spend a lot of time playing with, so that's quite nice to include because it's actually quite interactive. You can move it and see how different wages would affect you. So yeah, it's a lot of fun for people to use as well. The next thing I'm going to show you is, I'm not sure how many welfare advisors are on here. If you're not a welfare advisor, a lot of what we're going to look at will be quite baffling to you. But actually, if you're welfare advisors, if they need to look into a case in great depth, they need to see what benefits the DWP has taken into account. They need to see how a claim is impacting on other benefits. They will need this information. So I'll just show you the depth of information that you can access. I'm just going to get up the screen. Okay, you should be able to see the calculator screen now. Can you see that, Janet?
Yes, so I can see that perfectly.
Okay, we've got a case here. This is quite a complex case. It's a couple and they've got 4 children. I'm not going to go through the input because we've seen the screen, so I'm just going to show you how we can look into their situation. Now, this person's self-employed, doing a few hours a week. If you notice that we have important information coming up on the right-hand side here, and these are held behind the bell, so it gives you a notice of things that you might want to discuss with your client. If we go to results and reports, now this person is particularly worried about moving over to universal credit because she's heard about how it will affect self-employed people. So if we have a look here, this is her universal credit, but let's see what she was getting under the current system. And she's on the current system at the moment, and her concern is the change in income. And we can see actually that there's a very large change in income. She's going to be worse off by £707 a month. And under these, we can see which benefit she's getting at the moment. Earnings, bit of PIP, some child benefit, child tax credit, council tax support, some housing benefit, and some job seekers allowance. And under here, we've got some earnings, which will be her part-time, some PIP, child benefit, and no, the council tax support's gone, and the universal credit doesn't meet what she was getting before. So we need to have a look at this in more detail to see exactly what's going on. And it's a universal credit one we'll want to look at. So we'll go to a detailed breakdown again. And this is to show you the layers of the calculator. If we press on this I, we can have a very simple explanation. And this is what a lot of people who aren't welfare benefit advisors, they won't, this will be at the level that they're interested in, that they can have a quick look and see what's happening. But if you've got a complex case and somebody really needs a lot more advice, you can go to the expert calculation. And this provides the breakdown in a manner that you would probably assess it yourself. So it's got all the steps, and because it's step advice, it's easy for you to explain it to the claimant or your customer as well. We can see immediately that the housing hasn't been reduced, but look here, the net earned income is 1,046, and she was only earning, well, she was earning much less than that. So if we go to this question mark, we can see what's going on. Every time there's a further layer, there's a little question mark, so you'll know there's a layer beyond it. And we can see what's happened here is that the minimum income floor has been applied. And so 830 extra pounds has been added to her income that's been taken into account for the assessment. And that explains why her income falls so much. Similarly, income from savings, we can just do a quick breakdown and see what her income is from savings, because that's often a question people have. So we know that this person is badly off because of being self-employed. We have a modelling tool for putting in change of circumstances. You won't have seen this on the demonstration Leo just showed you. It's not something that's on the self-service version. But if we go to this, add scenario, all the information is copied over to a second. This is behind here, all the tabs for the first inputs, and now we can change anything to see the impact. So if we go to impact to income and earnings, and we make her employed, and she works a few more hours a week. You can immediately see on the right-hand panel, you can see the difference. But actually, it's more than her earnings difference because the minimum income floor is no longer applied. So we can see that by just working a few more hours a week, changing her status from self-employed to employed, she's quite a lot better off. Thanks, Janet. I think we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so yes, so we're now going to look at budgeting. We've looked at how the calculator can be used for self-service and how it can be used by advisors to drill down into how the assessment was made and to see if any further support's needed for the claimant. Often budgeting advice follows straight from this. In some cases, but the calculator was used. I know that some of the organisations are using the calculator as a standalone budgeting tool, and it works in for both. I'm going to just pass this over to Leo.
Thank you for that, Zoe. So what I'm going to demonstrate is some of the budgeting features that we have. So in this scenario, the person is in rent arrears and they are considering where they can potentially save on some budgeting information. So this is we go through and we basically enter the information in, but I want to just highlight some of the features that we have here. So I've entered in public transport, school costs. They're summarized on the right, the amount that is spent in each section. But what we have is this use average feature. A lot of the time, the feedback that we got from our customers was that people don't know the exact amounts that they spend and that they want to use average figures. So we did some research and we used the ONS figures of the third decile that can be altered depending from organisation to organisation. And this allows their customers to simply apply the averages based on the number of people in their household for their cohort. So you can see here that we applied £400 a month of groceries to this household, and we can start to see why this household was in rent arrears, as there is a deficit of £25 a month. The way we demonstrate this is actually putting together the income and the expenditure side by side to see where there's the potential savings. and we've got a number of features that enable the user to really pinpoint where money can be saved. So when we compare the cost with similar households, we can see where some households are spending more perhaps than the average based on their household. So we can see in this particular circumstance, this household is spending £60 a month more than the average would spend. And this is easily highlighted through the thumbs up and the thumbs down to really see if they could bring their deficit down. Now, we don't always have average figures for different spending. So what we've done is we've actually split up the expenditure to see where small daily costs can actually have a big impact on over the course of the year. So, for example, this household is spending £2 a day on the newspaper. Yeah, over the year it's £730. So it really highlights where the large expenditure is coming from. We also demonstrate visually where all the spending is going with a pie chart by seeing, based on each different section, what is the greatest percentage of the expenditure going on. So here, as would be expected, home and contents tends to be the largest share of this. This is rent and mortgage payments. You can see that this household is spending also quite a lot on communication and leisure. Obviously, highlighting on each of these extends it even further. And on the right, as you see this and you go through and we can see that they're spending too much, we can simply just add an action and the user could perhaps say reduce or cancel paper subscription, and then put a date, and then that gets stored as you go through. It's stored on your record. You could then keep when you download the case and take that home with you. Okay, thank you, Zoe. I'll pass back over to you.
Thanks, Leo. I think it's also quite interesting for all of us to use, to put in little daily expenses and see how much they add up in a year. It can be quite shocking. So we'll move on to, there's a couple of other features around budgeting I just want to discuss with you. Oh, sorry, could you move on a bit, Jan? Actually, this is going back to the previous case to show that the printouts that Leo was talking about, that actually they're personalised. So for this person, we can actually see how the minimum income floor affects them and the contributions expected from adults in their home. So it allows people to go away with records of actions. If we move to the next slide, I think we'll see that. Yeah, so these are the actions that Leo's just added. He was adding little actions on the side as he went through. These will come out in the report, together with any information from the case that the person selects to keep. In this case, they've selected to keep information about adults in their home and carers allowance. And this allows them to refer to it and actually have the figures that are personalised for their situation. Thanks, Janet. Yeah, this is what I wanted to discuss on budgeting. And this has been developed, it's actually being developed at this very moment. It's for feedback from housing associations primarily. But it actually allows people to have some assistance and know what's going to happen at their 7-week, after the end of their 7-week wait to universal credit. But it's also useful for people on legacy benefits because it allows them to see what they'll have in their hand after things are deducted automatically, and it helps them prioritise bills. So you answer a few simple questions. There's further questions that aren't showing here about overpayments and things. But if we move on. Sorry, Janet, it must be the slide after this. Yeah, here we go. This is what can be printed from that information. So the person will know the full income, and this is the amount you saw on the right-hand side on the panel. But then automatic deductions are taken off. For example, council tax, the amount straight to your landlord, an amount paid for rent in advance or overpayment recovery. And for all these amounts, the amount to your landlord, that we calculate that based on how much of the housing element they're getting. We calculate we use the regulations around recovery of overpayments, payments in advance. We do set different ones, obviously, if they're moving from legacy or if they're new universal credit claims. So all those regulations around how much people will have to pay back, and that will be deducted automatically from their benefit. It's done automatically by the calculator. It's not a whole new set of regulations your advisors need to know. But any of those figures can be overridden. So if somebody actually knows they've made an arrangement with DWP that they're paying back at £5 a week and they should be paying back at 11, they can put the £5 in. The report also then tells them their priority payments from the budgeting module Leo just showed you. And then it shows them what they've got left after priority payments have been met. And these are the priority payments used by most debt advisors. They're not all in there because there might have been some that haven't had costs put in them, and other outgoings. So the other outgoings are items that have been entered by the budget, and this lets the people see what their end income is after all these things have been taken out. Thanks, Janet. Just move on to the next slide. And the final thing I want to show you around budgeting is this calendar that allows people to see how their weekly based income, for example, income that's weekly, fortnightly, 4-weekly, fits in with their monthly universal credit payment. And obviously, if you've got a 4-weekly payment, like this person's got 4-weekly child benefit, in some months you're going to have 2 of those payments. They've got fortnightly carers allowance. Some months there'll be 2 of these, others 1. And your universal credit will change in relation to these. So this calendar lets people have some sort of awareness for the next 12 months, the amount of universal credit they would expect to receive. Obviously, if circumstances change, it'll need to be assessed again. This is at one particular point in time with these 3 types of income, what the impact on universal credit will be. Thanks, Janet.
Thanks very much, Zoe and Leo, for taking us through those 3 demonstrations. A lot to cover there, a lot of complexity, and which is hopefully, as you can see, being simplified using the software. At this point in time, we'd like to ask you, this is the last of our 3 polls that we're going to ask you today. Based on what you've seen now, which teams in your organisation do you think would get the most use from this software? I appreciate that for some of you who've only just seen this software for the first time, you might need another look, which we can organise for you. But from what you've seen so far, which teams do you think would get the most use from the software? So hopefully you can see the poll on your screen now, so please do vote. So the team options that we've given you are housing team, employment support teams, teams that look at rent arrears or indeed contract management, teams that deliver welfare and debt advice, and teams that deliver customer service or self-service management. Lots of votes coming in. Thank you very much. In a moment, Zoe will give you a bit of insight into how which teams in our clients are currently using the software. Thank you very much, everybody, for your votes. It's great to see them all coming in. I shall leave the poll open just a tiny bit longer, just to give everybody a chance to vote. And it's very interesting. I think one of the things that we're certainly struck by when we talk to clients is the breadth of support that teams can get from the software. So without further ado, thank you, everybody. I'm going to close the poll now and share the results with you, and you can see how you've all voted. So 100% of you say that the team that would get the most benefit from the software is the welfare and debt advice, closely followed by housing, rent and arrears and contract management, then housing, customer self-service, and employment support. Zoe, any comments on those results?
Well, apart from I'm very, very confused by these percentages. I presume that there's more than one choice, that people can choose more than one option.
Yes, that is the case.
I think welfare and debt advice, and it's so important. It's just really important that if this isn't given, if welfare and debt advice is not given early on, when somebody's transitioning to universal credit or they're putting a new claim for universal credit, they can get themselves in a dreadful mess that is very hard to get out of. I don't know if any of you saw the headline recently in the Metro, probably not, it's a London-based, I think, but it was about some woman who had become unemployed. She'd started claiming universal credit, and she believed her rent was going to be paid. She wasn't getting advice from her work coach. There was a delay. Eventually, when she got the benefit, she was having difficulty talking to anybody. She found out that she didn't get full rent, couldn't get a proper explanation, and it was because of the shared room rate. By this point, she's in dreadful debt. She ended up being homeless. The whole thing could have been managed if that person had had proper advice at the beginning. Because if they'd had advice at the beginning, they would have known that they weren't going to get that housing element. They could have looked for somewhere else to stay. They could have considered returning home, but they could have taken a considered response, rather than if you leave it to the last minute or when somebody's in real difficulty, you're having an emergency response, and perhaps at that stage not the correct response. So, I mean, it's really good to see this. I know we've got a lot of local authorities attending today, and I know that housing associations, they do this all the time. This is their bread and butter, and for local authorities with housing benefits and with if they've got their own housing stock. But it's as we move forward that the private tenants, where are they going to fall? And I think that's one of my biggest concerns, is where private tenants are going to fall. And all the local authorities I've visited seem so proactive in this. You know, they're upping their welfare and debt advice officers. They're increasing the amount of software they're using. They're having meetings with customers. They're advertising that they're the person that people should turn to if they've got problems. And it's just really good to see, because I think otherwise it is concerning that those people are going to have nowhere to turn.
Great, Zoe, thank you. What I'll do now then is stop sharing the poll. Okay. Zoe.
Yeah, just actually, Janet, there's just one quick thing I wanted to say about that previous slide. Don't need to go back, but one of the things I noticed that we didn't have on there was lettings, and it's increasingly, the calculator is actually increasingly being used by lettings, and this is about making the system simpler to understand for your customer, because it's not helping anyone if a customer takes a property that they're going to have real difficulty affording. And so to check sustainability and to check that it fits within the budget of a household, and to change circumstances. So if it fits in their budget now, what would happen if they lose a job? If you know somebody's in a precarious job situation, it allows lettings to do those sort of checks even before the housing officer. I'd just like to move on to some of the feedback we've had, and I just want to focus on the one in top right. It's very quick to use, so it was not taking up all our time during the meeting. It left more time to discuss the results with the customer. And I think this is hits the nail on the head. It's exactly what the software is for. It allows people to spend, the experts, and there are experts in all the organisations, the charities, the housing associations, local authorities, experts in all these organisations. You can make real differences to people's lives. And if they're not sitting there with pen and paper trying to work out calculations, or they're trying to work out the intricacies beyond the level that many of the calculators will show you, if it gives them the time to discuss how the person can move forward. And the modelling tools for employment, it's actually the expert's time is better used. And I was really pleased to see that comment.
Great, Zoe, thank you. So I think, thank you everybody for sending the questions through to us. It's great to see that we've got some questions from you. So Zoe and Leo as well. I've got some questions which I'm just going to ask you if I may. So first of all, does the software cover pensions?
Yeah, yes, it does. I mean, a lot of our customers are dealing with pension age as well as working age. So it does, it covers when pension age starts, it works out benefits for people on pension age, including the horrible savings credit. And any of you have had to do that with a pen and paper will be very pleased to hear that.
Excellent. And does the software calculate the amount of transitional protection that people need?
Yeah, I don't know if people noticed that as we were going through the cases, there were boxes popping up on the right-hand corner. These and that's the information that I showed you behind the bell. And we calculate the transitional protection for that particular household, and that's even for the self-employed, taking into account the use of the self-employed income, so the reduced transitional protection, so that people will actually know. And also in that, there's some information about what a change of circumstances is, which will mean they lose that transitional payment. So all the information that's important that you discuss with somebody to make sure they don't make their situation worse is produced for you. And the experts out there will know a lot more than we can put in on software, but it's actually a sort of marker for these are areas that are important, and just a reminder that you might want to discuss it further with your client.
Brilliant, Zoe. And I think this question might have come from the information that was shared yesterday in the Parliament, end of austerity. What happens to all of the inbuilt policy work when the policies change?
Well, we keep up to date. We will have modelled, we will have done the changes in advance, so it'll be rolled out. Any changes are immediately brought into the calculator, and this is done continually. I mean, even things I mentioned, the pension age, the continued 3 monthly change of what are the pension ages. These are, everything is put in as they happen, so that when you put in a case, you'll know that you've got all the legislation covered. And if legislation applied only for certain periods, by putting in the date the person's making a claim or likely to be making a claim, it allows us to ensure we apply the right legislation. And I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that this is an awful lot for the benefit advisors or housing officers to be keeping in their mind. And it's actually a short, if we can ensure that we've got all the legislation covered, it really means that the advisors can concentrate on the customer.
We've got it covered for them.
Yeah.
Zoe, thank you. Another question here. Can the software take into account rent-free weeks?
Yeah, I don't know. I might pass over to Leo, but actually, I'll just answer this. Yeah, we put in the number of rent-free weeks, and then in the results and reports, you have a little toggle, and you can see the amount of benefit they'll receive on one of their weeks they pay rent, and the amount they'll get on the weeks they don't pay rent. So it takes in rent-free weeks throughout. There's also warnings to people about the different treatment of rent-free weeks under universal credit and housing benefits, so people aren't taken by surprise.
Great, thanks, Zoe. Leo, shout up if you've anything to add there on that.
I was just going to show how we demonstrate the rent-free weeks, because it's quite interesting to see how different people interpret them. So what we've done is we've actually given you the option to see it with the rent-free weeks included or without.
Do you want me to share
the average rent?
Sorry, Leo, do you want me to share the screen? Are you going to?
Yeah, that'd be great, actually.
Okay, let me.
Yeah. If you share the screen, that would be great, actually.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, so I've just gone back to the case that we were using before, and I've actually entered just 4 rent-free weeks. You could enter any number up to 52, obviously. And I went to results and reports. And when you enter rent-free weeks, this actually gets triggered, and this shows basically it allows you to show what the housing benefit would be over a 52-week average or in the rental period that has been selected. So if you flip between the two, you'll see the housing benefit will change appropriately and actually go up in this instance. So whichever way you're comfortable and the user is comfortable viewing these figures is the way that you can see.
Great, thanks, Leo. Okay, and so for the person who asked that question, do let me know if you'd like more detail on that. We can.
More than happy to talk to anyone about this feature after the session.
Fantastic, thanks, Leo. Okay, and then I think we're doing well in terms of time. So do ask more questions as they come along. While people are still putting their thinking caps on, Zoe, Leo, how much training do people need to use the software?
Well, I think when we've had sessions with people, they pick it up very quickly. We offer training to fit in with what the organisation requires. Some organisations ask us to train the senior people, who then train their staff. Others prefer us to do a series of webinars for all their staff because the different staff have different needs and they'll be asking different questions. So we'll roll out a training programme. I mean, it's all included. I mean, we'll roll out a training programme to fit with the organisation.
And I suppose the other thing then to point out as well, sorry, Leah, were you just going to mention OLAP?
I was just going to say, yeah, exactly. So the software was designed in an intuitive manner, with sort of guidance throughout, and we were quite keen on including the inbuilt chat function that you see in the bottom right of the calculator, where you can ask any questions, whether they be technical or benefit specific, especially as new policy is being rolled out every couple of months.
And can I just say that chat function is used by an awful lot of people using the self-service calculator. So instead of, if you had the self-service calculator in your customer service department, instead of having to go to reception, wait to see an advisor, they can chat to us and my JSA is going down, why? We can look at their case, we can chat to them about it, we can discuss regulations, we can discuss benefits with them. And so an awful lot of our queries are actually coming from self-service advisors, so it does help them, and it does mean that if they only have one simple little query, they're not taking up your time.
Great. Okay, and just a couple more questions, if I may, Zoe and Leo. How long do you estimate a typical case? I note the word typical. How long would a typical case take to assess?
I think Leo's got some figures on this, so I'll pass this over to Leo because I know he's got some measurements of this.
It also depends what you're trying to get out of the calculator. If you just want a sort of result, what benefits could they receive? We're looking at sort of 2 to 4 minutes, depending on the complexity of the case, once you know your way around the calculator. Obviously, doing budgeting assessments do tend to take a bit more time because it's more detailed and there's a lot of smaller costs. But the great thing about this software, and the reason why it's so quick, is that we have really reduced the number of questions that are needed to be asked, and you only need to answer questions that are required based on the complexity of the case, so that a simple case is very quick and a complicated case takes a bit more time. So around 2 to 4 minutes, I'd say. So
questions that aren't relevant don't appear.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't appear. So you don't get bogged down in lots of questions that to that particular case won't affect them.
Excellent.
And also, because we have this feature on the side of the calculator where you get a live instant update of what your income would be. If you're simply wanting to see what a situation would be, you just need their household details, and you knew that there was no income and earnings, you can get a very quick assessment like that as well.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. And the final question, if I may, what customizations can you do for me? So what customizations are available for organisations? An
awful lot, actually. Sorry, I'll pass over to Leo on this. Sorry, Leo, you take this one.
I don't mind. So depending on the needs of the organisations, we can actually hide and show a lot of different fields, a lot of different accordions, depending on the needs of the users. So, for example, we can hide the sliders. If you want, we can hide certain cells. We can also change the color to match the organization's branding. We can add their logos. We can link it to organizations' websites. So we are pretty flexible in terms of what we can customize.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is that on the self-service portal in particular, some of our customers have the budgeting facility for their tenants or their customers, others don't. And we have a homelessness charity using it. There's quite a lot of customization we can help them with. It will depend on your organisation and how you're going to use the calculator.
Great, good stuff. And I've got somebody here that has sent a question in, hoping that they're not too late. You're not. This will be the final question about the complexity point that we were talking about. Would the calculator pick up universal credit housing costs eligibility for under 22s?
Yep, yes. Absolutely. Of course it does. I mean, as I said, we keep on top. We keep on top of all the regulations. So if somebody is of an age where they might not get housing support, I don't know. Are you going to show this, Leo?
Well, I was just going to say the same point. We only ask for eligibility for support for 18 to 21-year-olds. We do ask additional questions, but only when the users entered an age between 18 and 21. So then from that, we make the assessment of whether they get support.
Yeah. So all the questions, all the regulations around who does get support and who doesn't get the support are covered. Excellent. But they'll only show if need be.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody, for all your questions. A really useful session there at the end, I hope. And if I could point you to the survey that's going to happen automatically at the end of the webinar. You can ask more questions there, of course, and there is some, if you could give us your feedback about what you've seen, that would be fantastic. And there's also the chance for you to get just to ask us for a personalised demo for your colleagues as well, because we know that every team is different and people want to see different things. And so do note in there if you'd like to have your own personalised demo of different stuff. Also, before we finish, if I could just point out to you as well, I should have done it at the beginning, my apologies. There are 2 handouts that you can download from the panel on the right hand side. One is a flyer just giving the highlights of the software. You'll see some of the a slide graphic that Zoe talked about earlier on that flyer. That's useful for colleagues as well. And also you can download the welfare reform roadmap that we had right at the beginning of the session as well. We know that lots of people have printed that out and have it pinned up on their office wall as well. So without further ado, I would just like to say thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And also thank you very much to Zoe and to Leo for the excellent demos and the questions. Short survey coming up, your feedback, questions or clarifications, and to get a tailored demo for your colleagues. That's your chance there. And it just leaves me to say thank you. If you want to email Zoe or Leo, here are their email addresses on the screen now, or you can email hello@policyandpractice.co.uk, and there's our phone number as well. We do hope to hear from you. We would love to come and do tailored demos, either on a webinar like this specifically for your team, or indeed to come to you face to face as well. Thanks ever so much, everybody, and have a great rest of the day. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.